Tonight, we pull back the curtain on the world's most powerful combat organization, the UFC. For decades, it's been sold to us as the ultimate proving ground, where the toughest men and women on the planet test themselves in the purest form of competition. But behind the spectacle, behind the belts, the money, and the fame, there's a darker story, one that very few have been willing to tell on camera. For months, we've spoken to fighters, managers, and even former employees. Some agreed to talk. Most refused. A few sent us documents that they claimed could ruin their lives if traced back. And all of them, every single one, told us the same thing, that the real fight inside the UFC isn't in the cage. It's behind closed doors. The UFC presents itself as a celebration of courage, discipline, and freedom. But those who have lived inside its system describe something else entirely. Manipulation, fear, and control. One former fighter told us, "It's not about fighting anymore. It's about obedience. You play their game, or you disappear." How did we get here? How did a sport that began as a raw, underground contest of martial arts evolve into one of the most ruthless business machines in entertainment history? To understand that, we have to go back to when the UFC stopped being a sport and started being an empire. When the Fertitta brothers bought the UFC in 2001, it was almost bankrupt. Within 5 years, it became a cultural phenomenon. Fighters like Chuck Liddell, Georges St-Pierre, Anderson Silva, they turned the Octagon into a global stage. But as the fame grew, so did the stakes. Sponsors poured in. Pay-per-view revenue exploded, and somewhere along the way, the purity of competition was replaced by something far colder. Control through contracts, and silence through fear. Because the UFC doesn't just promote fights, it owns fighters. At least, that's what the documents we've obtained suggest. The contracts are long, complicated, and filled with what experts call career traps. Clauses that allow the organization to freeze fighters contract indefinitely if they refuse to accept a bout, or even if they're injured. We found at least 5 examples where fighters were effectively benched for years, unable to sign with anyone else, unable to earn, unable to speak. But that's only the surface. According to multiple insiders, the real control mechanism isn't in the paperwork. It's psychological. Fighters are told that loyalty is everything. Speak out, and you'll never fight again. Question a decision, and you'll never see the main card. In an industry where one fight can define your future, silence becomes survival. And it doesn't stop there. Former matchmakers and agents we interviewed claim that rankings, the supposed merit-based ladder that determines who fights for titles, are anything but objective. One source told us bluntly, the rankings move when the company wants them to move. Popularity beats performance. Compliance beats merit. The more we dug, the clearer it became. The system is built not to reward the best, but to protect the powerful. And at the center of that power stands one man, Dana White. Charismatic, outspoken, often praised as the savior of more, but also feared, and almost untouchable. In the next part, we'll look at how White's grip on the organization goes far beyond the cameras, how he uses money, access, and influence to shape the entire narrative of the sport, and why even some of his closest allies are starting to question whether the empire has gone too far. Power. In the UFC, that word has a face. Dana White, for more than 2 decades, has been the driving force, the public voice, and the iron hand behind the sport's global rise. To many fans, he's the no-nonsense boss who gets things done. To others, especially those who've crossed him, he's something else entirely. Inside the company, former employees describe a culture built around fear and loyalty. You don't question Dana, one ex-staffer told us. If you do, you're gone. And everyone knows it. Fighters who step out of line are quietly punished, not through open confrontation, but through silence. Suddenly, they stop getting big fights. Their promotion disappears. Calls stop being returned. And if they complain publicly, The organization responds with a smile and a simple line: "They're just bitter." We spoke to one fighter, under anonymity, who described how quickly your world can collapse in the UFC. He had been on a 3-fight win streak and expected a top 10 opponent next. Instead, his contract was frozen. For 6 months, he waited, no fights, no pay, no explanation. When he asked his manager why, the answer was chillingly direct: "You pissed off Dana." This is how control is maintained, not through threats, but through access. In the UFC, access is everything. Access to fights, access to media, access to opportunity. And every fighter knows that one wrong word can close those doors forever. Money plays its part too. Fighters are independent contractors, not employers, a technical classification that saves the company millions while giving it maximum leverage. Fighters pay their own medical bills, their own camps, their own travel, but can't sign with any other promotion while under contract. Even their sponsorships are controlled. Since the Reebok deal in 2015, and later Venom, fighters lost the freedom to wear their own logos, a move that slashed their personal income but strengthened corporate branding. Publicly, Dana White calls it business. Privately, insiders describe it as calculated suppression. "It's not just about money," one former matchmaker said. "It's about reminding everyone who's in charge." And yet, despite growing criticism, White's power has only expanded. In 2016, the Fertitta brothers sold the UFC to a meme for over $4 billion, the largest sale in sports history. Many thought Dana would step back. Instead, he doubled down. His new corporate backers gave him more autonomy than ever. The empire had gone corporate, but the cage still belonged to him. In leaked internal memos we reviewed, executives describe White as critical to brand identity, the emotional anchor of the company, and, tellingly, the one figure the fanbase cannot turn against. That kind of status doesn't come without consequences. When your entire brand depends on one man's image, accountability disappears. And that image, the tough, streetwise boss who doesn't answer to anyone, is what keeps the empire alive. But it's also what shields everything happening underneath: fighter exploitation, silence dissent, and an environment where the line between loyalty and submission has all but vanished. In the next part, we dive deeper into the money, the numbers the UFC doesn't like to talk about. We'll reveal leaked payout documents, secret clauses in broadcast deals, and the uncomfortable truth about who really profits when blood hits the canvas. Money. It's the engine that drives the fight game, and the UFC has perfected the art of turning combat into currency. From pay-per-view sales to sponsorships, from international broadcasting rights to performance bonuses, the promotion has built one of the most profitable sports ecosystems on the planet. But when you start digging into the numbers, the truth gets uncomfortable fast. On paper, the UFC presents itself as a model of success. In 2024, revenue estimates surpassed $1 billion, with profit margins that would make most sports leagues jealous. But while the company grows richer every year, the fighters, the ones who literally bleed for it, see only a fraction of that wealth. Industry analysts and leaked financial reports paint a clear picture. Fighters collectively receive between 13 and 17% of total revenue. For comparison, athletes in the NFL, NBA, and even boxing often get 50% or more. That gap isn't just business, it's strategy. By keeping fighters classified as independent contractors, the UFC avoids revenue sharing, unionization, and collective bargaining. We reviewed several leaked fighter contracts, and the language is as cold as it gets. Compensation at promoter's discretion, bouts subject to availability, termination at any time for cause. The fine print gives the company full control over when, where, and if a fighter competes, while locking them into multi-year deals that can be extended indefinitely. One fighter, who spoke with us off the record, shared screenshots of emails between his manager and UFC executives after he turned down a short-notice fight. Within hours, his next bout was cancelled. 2 months later, His contract was frozen. He hasn't fought since. They don't have to threaten you, he told us. They just stop your career. Then there are the bonuses. The $50,000 checks that Dana White announces after each event. To fans, they look generous. But to fighters, they're a control tool. As one former coach said, "You don't get a bonus for winning. You get a bonus for making Dana happy." Even bigger than fighter pay are the hidden deals. Broadcast rights and sponsorship packages negotiated behind closed doors. According to internal documents leaked to us, the F's deal with ESPN includes flexibility clauses that allow the network to adjust payouts based on brand narrative. Translation: if a fight sells well, ESPN profits. If it doesn't, fighters don't see a dime more. And that's before we even talk about the side business, the licensing, merchandise, digital streaming, and Fight Pass data sales. Every highlight clip, every replay, every second of footage belongs to the company, not the fighters who created it. Their likeness, their name, their voice owned forever, even after retirement. When we contacted EFC representatives for comment, they declined to answer specific questions about contract terms or profit distribution. Instead, they sent a short statement. "Our athletes are the best compensated fighters in our history." That may be technically true, but only because the system ensures they have nowhere else to go. Competing promotions can't match the exposure, and most fighters can't afford to walk away. The cage isn't just a ring anymore. It's a cage made of contracts. And yet, somehow, the machine keeps running. Fans keep watching. Fighters keep signing. Because for every story of control, there's always one of hope. The dream that maybe, just maybe, you can beat the system by becoming too big to silence. In the next part, we'll expose how that dream is used as bait, how stardom itself becomes a trap, and how the UF's biggest names are often the ones most tightly controlled by the organization that made them. Every fighter who steps into the Octagon dreams of becoming a star, to headline cards, to hold belts, to see their face on posters and video games. It's the promise that keeps the system alive. But inside the UFC, fame isn't freedom, it's a leash. The brighter you shine, the tighter the company holds you. The public sees the big names: Conor McGregor, Khabib Nurmagomedov, Ronda Rousey, Jon Jones, icons who helped turn more into a global spectacle. But behind the cameras, their success came with invisible strings. Every appearance, every tweet, every public word was part of a carefully managed brand narrative. Step outside that script, and the consequences could be severe. One veteran fighter told us, "The UFC doesn't just build stars, they build puppets. They own your story." Insiders describe a two-tier system. The privileged elite who receive media protection, sponsorship deals, and favorable matchmaking, and everyone else. The chosen few get guaranteed pay-per-view points, prime placement, and corporate backing. The rest are expendable. Lose once, twice, 3 times, you vanish. It sounds like business, but it's deeper than that. According to leaked internal correspondence we obtained, UFC executives discuss fighters not as athletes, but as narrative assets. That phrase appears multiple times in strategy memos tied to pay-per-view marketing campaigns. The logic is simple. Fans don't buy fights, they buy stories. And the company controls the stories. Even controversy becomes a marketing tool. When Conor McGregor attacked a bus before UFC 223, fans saw chaos. The company saw profit. Within days, that footage was used in promotional material for his comeback fight. When Jon Jones tested positive, when Khabib jumped the cage, when Ronda walked away, every scandal was rewritten into entertainment. But the control doesn't stop at image management. Sources close to the matchmaking process claim that favoritism is standard practice. Fighters who follow corporate rules get opportunities faster. Those who question policies find themselves waiting months for fights. A few who spoke out publicly about pay, about sponsorship, about fighter rights, were quietly cut. One coach, who's worked with multiple UFC champions, told us, the system rewards obedience. If you're good and loud, they'll use you. If you're good and smart, they'll bury you. And for the biggest stars, the price of fame can be isolation. Fighters are surrounded by handlers, media teams, filters, people who report everything back to the organization. One former champion described it as being owned by an empire you helped build. When we reached out to several high-profile fighters for comment, most declined. One texted us privately, "You have no idea how deep it goes. We're all replaceable, even the legends." The UF's narrative machine doesn't just control careers, it controls perception. The public sees rivalry, drama, and glory. What they don't see is the quiet machinery behind it all. A system that turns athletes into brands, and brands into tools of control. In the next part, we'll look at the moments when that control started to crack, the whistleblowers, the lawsuits, and the people who risked everything to speak out, and how, even when the truth came out, the empire managed to silence it again. Every empire has its rebels, and the UFC is no different. Over the years, a handful of fighters, managers, and insiders have tried to pull back the curtain. They've spoken about exploitation, intimidation, and silence. But in the fight against the world's most powerful combat organization, truth is rarely enough. Let's start with the class action lawsuit. In 2014, several former UFC fighters, including veterans like Kungler, John Fitch, and Nate Quarry, filed a massive antitrust suit against the organization. Their claim was simple: the UFC was operating as a monopoly, using its power to lock fighters into unfair contracts and crush rival promotions. 4 years, the case crawled through the courts, buried under motions and sealed documents. But when parts of those filings became public, the revelations were stunning. Internal emails between executives described strategies to neutralize competition and control the narrative. Some of those same documents reference brand isolation tactics, code for blacklisting fighters who spoke out. One email, dated 2013, allegedly from a senior matchmaker, said, "We need to make an example. If they complain, they don't fight." But it didn't stop with legal pressure. Fighters who dared to talk to the media about pay or conditions often found themselves mysteriously sidelined. A pattern emerged: criticize the company, lose your fight deal, demand transparency, your ranking disappears, go public, suddenly, your name isn't mentioned on broadcasts. One source, a former UFC staff member who asked to remain anonymous, told us, "There's an entire department dedicated to damage control. They monitor social media 24/7. Every tweet, every podcast, every interview is flagged, categorized, and archived." In 2020, a rising contender went live on Instagram, accusing the promotion of slave contracts and corporate bullying. Within 24 hours, the video was gone. A week later, the fighter issued a formal apology, reading from what looked like a prepared script. The caption: "I spoke out of emotion. The UFC takes care of its athletes." The tone: robotic, terrified. And then there's the Whisper Network, stories that never make it to the press. Fighters being advised to switch managers after disputes. Journalists losing media credentials for asking the wrong questions. Referees and judges rumored to have been quietly reassigned after controversial calls that cost the company money. When we reached out to one prominent journalist, he said, "You learn fast. If you want access, you don't bite the hand that feeds the sport. They can shut you out instantly. No interviews, no credentials, no career." It's not just about control. It's about shaping reality itself. When the organization owns the footage, the platforms, and the narrative, truth becomes optional. Fighters can shout, but their words vanish into silence. And the fans, they see only what the company allows them to see. The promos, the countdowns, the highlight reels, all part of the same script. Every punch you cheer for, every feud you think is real, might be breaking. In the next part, We'll uncover what those insiders are saying now, the private recordings, leaked emails, and the shocking claims that could redefine everything we thought we knew about the UFC. It started with one leak, a short, anonymous clip uploaded to an obscure combat sports forum in early 2023. The video showed what looked like a private UFC strategy meeting. A blurred-out executive voice could be heard discussing fighter compliance, narrative synergy, and media conditioning. Within hours, the video disappeared. The user account was deleted, but by then, copies had already spread across the internet. We can't verify every detail of that clip, but multiple insiders confirmed that the terminology was real. Compliance, they said, referred to behavioral monitoring, a system used to evaluate how closely fighters aligned with the company's messaging. Those who played along were promoted. Those who didn't were deprioritized. Soon after, more leaks surfaced. Email chains, redacted memos, snippets of recorded calls, all painting a picture of a tightly controlled empire, where every headline, rivalry, and emotional moment could be engineered. In one internal note, a PR executive wrote, "Drama sells. Control the drama. Control the market." We obtained fragments of a document labeled Athlete Influence Management Plan, allegedly circulated among senior marketing staff. The plan detailed how select athletes could be directed to engage in pre-approved online conflicts, digital sparring, as the memo called it, to increase engagement before major pay-per-view events. Think about that. Some of the feuds you've seen online, the insults, the outbursts, the staged confrontations, might not be spontaneous at all. They could be scripted, coordinated, and amplified by the company's own media teams. One whistleblower, a former social media contractor for the UFC, told us, "We'd get instructions to start trending hashtags that made fighters look angry at each other. Half the time, those fighters had already filmed promo content together. It was theater. High-level, perfectly executed theater." But the most explosive leak came months later. A series of internal emails suggesting that certain narrative assets, yes, that same term again, were being stabilized through financial incentives. Translation: fighters were being paid not just to fight, but to act like characters in an ongoing story, to maintain rivalries, fake feuds, and exaggerated personas. In one email chain, allegedly between senior executives and peer advisors, a note reads, "The fighter name redacted storyline is resonating strongly. Maintain tension at pressers. Arrange unscripted moments at weigh-in. Deliver bonus upon viral metrics." When we reached out to the UFC for comment on these leaks, we received a familiar response: fabricated materials, no validity. But several fighters, speaking off record, didn't deny it. One of them said simply, "You ever wonder why so many feuds feel like TV drama? That's because they are." And then came the audio recordings. Two short clips, both allegedly captured during off-the-record production meetings. In one, a voice that sounds eerily similar to a high-ranking official can be heard saying, "We're not running a sport. We're running a spectacle." In another, a producer is heard instructing a cameraman, "Stay close on his face when he reacts. We need emotion, not authenticity." Maybe these leaks are all part of something bigger. Maybe they're fragments of truth buried under layers of denial and PR spin. But the message is clear. The lines between reality and fiction inside the UFC have blurred beyond recognition. In the next part, we'll dive deeper into the most controversial allegation yet, that certain fights, outcomes, and even referee decisions may have been influenced by commercial priorities rather than competition. Let's talk about the one topic no fan wants to believe: fight manipulation. Not full-on fixing, not scripted outcomes, but subtle, deliberate influence. Because in a billion-dollar empire built on blood and spectacle, the difference between chaos and choreography can be worth millions. Insiders don't call it fixing, they call it influence management. And it doesn't always mean telling a fighter to lose. It means creating conditions where a certain outcome becomes more likely, more marketable, more profitable. Leaked internal communications, reviewed by journalists and legal analysts, refer to something called Event Optimization Protocol. The phrasing sounds technical, harmless even, but buried in that language are suggestions of referee discretion alignment and momentum narrative support. In plain English, subtle nudges, small manipulations that shape what happens in the cage, without crossing the line into criminal fixing. We spoke to a retired referee who described it this way: they never tell you directly, but before certain fights, you get a reminder about letting the action flow, about not stopping too early. It's their way of setting tone. You understand what they want, without them ever saying it. A former matchmaker, who worked under confidentiality for years, echoed the sentiment. It's not about rigging fights, it's about guiding the story. You make sure the right people win at the right time, and when you think about it, the pattern fits. How many times have we seen controversial decisions in favor of stars who sell pay-per-views? How many fights where a referee gave just enough rope to a popular name, letting them survive a bad round to turn things around later? Too many to ignore. One of the most telling moments came during a pay-per-view event in 2022. A heavily favored prospect, hyped as the next superstar, was clearly losing, until a sudden, questionable stoppage ended the fight in his favor. The crowd booed. The analysts hesitated. But within hours, the UFC's official social channels flooded with clips celebrating the epic comeback. The narrative was rewritten instantly. Then there's matchmaking, the most powerful tool of influence the UFC possesses. Fighters don't pick opponents, the company does. And that means they can engineer careers, rise and fall, with surgical precision. A striker gets matched with a grappler. A legend gets paired with a newcomer. A brawler faces a stylistic nightmare. Every decision shifts the story, and every story sells tickets. One former champion told us bluntly, if they want you to win, they'll find you someone you can beat. If they want you gone, they'll feed you to a monster. It's a game of power, not fairness. And the fans, sitting at home, never see the strings. They see chaos, competition, passion. But behind it all, there's a quiet calculation. Who brings ratings, who sells subscriptions, who keeps the brand alive? And it's not just about the fights themselves. Judges, commentators, and even camera angles play a role in crafting the illusion. Close rounds get spun by commentary bias. The replay team chooses what the audience sees and what they don't. By the time the scorecards are read, the narrative is already written. When we asked one industry insider whether the UFC could be manipulating outcomes, he paused for a long time before answering. They don't need to fix fights. They fix everything around the fight. In the next part, we'll uncover how this control extends far beyond the Octagon, into athletic commissions, media partnerships, and even state-level lobbying. Because when a company gets this powerful, the sport doesn't just bend, it obeys. When a company grows powerful enough to shape perception, it doesn't just dominate a sport, it infiltrates its institutions. The UFC doesn't exist in isolation, it operates through a web of commissions, politicians, broadcasters, and media partners who all have a stake in keeping the machine running. And that's where the story turns from corporate to political. Start with the athletic commissions, the bodies that are supposed to regulate the sport, ensure fair play, and protect fighters. On paper, they're independent. In reality, they depend on the UFC. Every major event brings millions in revenue to local economies. Hotels, taxis, sponsorships, tourism. When the UFC comes to town, the city makes money, and the commission gets attention, prestige, and political leverage. One former state commissioner told us privately, no one wants to be the guy who loses a UFC event. You look the other way when you have to. Everyone does. Documents obtained through public records requests show dozens of emails between UFC executives and state athletic officials coordinating events, approving short notice licenses, and discussing mutual priorities. In one exchange, an official even asks whether the company could highlight the commission positively during BROEDCASTS, essentially PR in exchange for leniency. Then there's the lobbying. The UFC's parent company, TCO Group Holdings, spends millions every year on political influence, quietly funding campaigns and lobbying efforts aimed at sports regulation, labor law, and digital media rights. A deep dive into federal filings shows consistent donations to both major U.S. parties, especially to committees connected with media and sports regulation. The goal: stability, control, protection. But perhaps the most important layer of this shield is the media. The UFC doesn't just partner with broadcasters, it owns its coverage. ESPN, the official broadcast partner, is locked into a long-term deal worth hundreds of millions. That deal doesn't just give ESPN exclusive rights to stream fights, it ties their financial success directly to the UFC's reputation. If the company looks bad, ESPN loses money. So guess how often they investigate it critically? Almost never. A veteran More journalist described it best. It's not journalism anymore. It's marketing with microphones. Independent outlets that dig too deep find doors closing fast. Media credentials revoked. Fighters told not to appear on their shows. Representatives forgetting to send invites to press conferences. And soon, those journalists vanish, replaced by a new wave of content creators and influencers who praise the brand and play along with the official narrative. It's a feedback loop of control. The UFC funds commissions. The commissions approve events. The media glorifies them. The politicians pose for photos. Everyone wins, except the fighters, the fans, and the truth. In one particularly telling case, a former senator, now serving on the board of a major sports lobbying firm, was seen attending closed-door meetings with UFC executives to discuss athlete classification. Weeks later, proposed legislation that could have improved fighter labor rights quietly disappeared. Coincidence? Maybe, but the timing was impeccable. What we're seeing isn't just a fight promotion, it's a political machine disguised as entertainment, one that's learned how to weaponize influence, perception, and loyalty at every level. And like any political empire, it protects itself through distraction. Every time a scandal breaks, a fighter underpaid, a bad stoppage, a shady deal, there's suddenly a new headline, a new feud, a new viral clip to drown out the noise. But the noise is growing. Whistleblowers are multiplying. Journalists are organizing. Fans are starting to see patterns they can't ignore. The question now isn't whether the system is corrupt, it's how deep the corruption goes. In the next part, we'll pull back one more layer, exploring how power inside the UFC concentrates around a handful of individuals, how decisions are really made, and how loyalty and fear have replaced transparency and accountability. Inside the UFC, power doesn't operate through titles or departments. It flows through relationships, through an inner circle so small and so loyal that even high-ranking executives don't always know who truly makes the final calls. Officially, the company has a board, a CEO, divisions, procedures. Unofficially, decisions come from rooms where no one takes notes and every phone is left outside. At the center of it all is Damon Ward, the public face, the dealmaker, the man who built his image on charisma, aggression, and dominance. To fans, as the promoter who tells it like it is. To insiders, as a tactician who understands power like a chess master. Nothing happens in the company without his awareness. Every fighter feud, every media narrative, every coincidental viral controversy, it all runs through him. But even Damon doesn't operate alone. Around him is a group known internally as the Council. 5 to 7 senior figures with overlapping influence over operations, talent, media, and legal affairs. Their names rarely appear in public filings. Some are former executives, others are investors, lobbyists, or high-level partners at outside agencies. Together, They maintain what insiders call the shield, a network of loyalty built on mutual profit and silence. A former employer described it this way: "It's not a company, it's a syndicate of influence. Everyone owes someone, and if you break the chain, you disappear." There are whispers of quiet rivalries within that circle, internal power struggles between those who want to expand globally at any cost, and those who prefer to tighten control domestically. Leaked meeting notes show tension over the growing influence of streaming data, athlete branding, and the potential for independent fighter unions. Some fear that too much exposure could fracture the empire. Others see it as the next step in total dominance. One of the most striking details comes from an alleged internal document, labeled Governance Continuity Framework, essentially a manual for maintaining control if key figures ever step down or face public backlash. It outlines how decision-making authority can be redistributed through proxy partners, and how narrative consistency must be preserved across media, regardless of leadership changes. Think about that. Even if Damon Ward walked away tomorrow, the machine would keep running, guided by invisible hands already trained to protect the illusion. And it's not just about leadership. It's about loyalty. Fighters who play along get rewarded. Backstage access, private jets, personal sponsorships, sudden spikes in promotion. Those who question the system are quietly erased, not with public punishment, but with professional suffocation. No fights, no media coverage, no explanation. A top 10 contender who requested anonymity told us, "You think the fights are about skill? Half of it's politics. If you're in their good graces, you rise. If not, you fade away, no matter how good you are." Even managers and agents aren't immune. Multiple sources describe cooperation programs, informal agreements where managers provide the company with data on their own clients, in exchange for better matchups or faster renewals. One insider called it the tax of survival. And behind it all, there's a culture of fear. Employees sign extensive non-disclosure agreements, monitored even after they leave. Leaked HR guidelines reference post-exit compliance monitoring, which allegedly involves tracking social media and public commentary for months after termination. The message is clear. Silence isn't optional. It's policy. What's most chilling is how normal all of it feels to those inside. They call it protecting the brand, managing perception, keeping order. It's corporate language used to mask something far darker. A culture where fear equals loyalty, and loyalty equals survival. In the next part, we'll reveal how this internal power structure not only controls fighters and staff, but also manipulates fans through algorithms, social media campaigns, and psychological triggers designed to make you feel what they want, when they want. Control doesn't end inside the cage. It extends to every screen you look at. The UFC's greatest weapon isn't just its fighters or its promoters, it's the algorithm. The modern fan doesn't just watch the sport, they consume it through social media, through clips, memes, highlights, and reactions. And the company knows exactly how to control that flow. According to multiple digital marketing insiders, the UFC's media strategy isn't just about promotion, it's about behavioral conditioning. The idea is simple. Control what fans see, and you control what they think. Every trending clip, every quote, every viral feud is part of a calculated psychological ecosystem designed to maintain emotional engagement and brand loyalty. We obtained a partial presentation from a 2023 internal summit titled Digital Engagement Dynamics, a document intended for the UF's social and analytics teams. One slide in particular stood out. It read, "Anger drives engagement by 43%. Conflict increases retention by 67%. The narrative must always create tension. That's not marketing, that's manipulation." One former social media analyst told us, "We were trained to measure emotional spikes, to push whatever content made people mad, even if it made the sport look chaotic. Rage was good for business. If a fighter posts something controversial, the algorithm pushes it. If two fighters argue online, the UFC amplifies it across platforms. Fans think they're witnessing authentic emotion, but what they're really seeing is an engineered reaction loop, built to keep them scrolling, clicking, buying. And it doesn't stop at social media. Multiple sources familiar with the company's digital operations claim that the UFC actively coordinates with third-party fan accounts, pages that look independent, but are actually operated by marketing subcontractors. Their job: flood the conversation with pre-approved narratives, drown out criticism, and redirect attention when scandals break. Ever noticed how, whenever a fighter complains about pay or treatment, there's suddenly a wave of fans calling them ungrateful? That's not coincidence. That's narrative defense in action. A whistleblower from a media partner described it as shadow PR. He said, "They don't censor you directly, they outnumber you. You can't argue with 1,000 fake voices." Then there's the data. The UFC collects massive amounts of behavioral information through Fight Pass, its streaming service. Every pause, every rewind, every reaction helps them understand what fans respond to emotionally. That data feeds directly into content strategy, determining which fighters get pushed, which stories get told, and which controversies get reignited. We've seen evidence of emotion heat maps, internal analytics visualizations showing which moments in fights trigger the strongest fan reactions online. Those moments aren't just observed, they're replicated. Fighters are encouraged to play into those emotions, consciously or not. It's not just marketing anymore, it's psychological engineering, a system designed to keep fans addicted to outrage, loyalty, and spectacle. Even more disturbing are the claims of sentiment intervention, the term used in a leaked communication between PR staff and a third-party analytics firm. The memo suggested adjusting video titles, thumbnails, and captions in real time to steer fan reactions toward positive emotions, or away from critical narratives. One example cited a controversial referee stoppage. Within hours, the clip title was changed from "controversial ending" to "unbelievable comeback." The dislikes disappeared. The comments section reset. The narrative flipped overnight. It's propaganda wrapped in entertainment, and most fans never even realize it's happening. In the next part, we'll look at how this manipulation extends beyond social media, into live events, fan experiences, and even the fighters' personal brands, turning reality itself into a carefully constructed illusion. Every roar of the crowd, every camera pan, every perfectly timed slow-motion replay, none of it happens by accident. The UFC doesn't just produce fights, it produces emotion. The live event isn't a sport. It's theater disguised as competition, designed to make you feel exactly what they want, exactly when they want it. Inside the arena, everything is engineered, from the lighting cues to the walkout timing. The Octagon sits in the middle like a stage, surrounded by an audience that's being directed without ever realizing it. The music rises not when a fighter wins, but when the emotion peaks. The lights dim not for drama, but for control. Even the camera angles are choreographed to guide your sympathy, to frame who's the hero and who's the villain. A production coordinator who worked several major events told us, "There's a control room with over 40 screens, and every second is scripted. You're watching what they want you to see, not what's really happening." The crowd, too, is part of the manipulation. Through lighting and audio control, the production team can amplify cheers or boos depending on the desired narrative. In a leaked internal email, a technician referred to this process as audience emotion enhancement. During one major event, we confirmed that microphones were repositioned mid-fight to make the cheers for a favored fighter sound louder on the broadcast. And it works. The human brain follows the crowd. You hear cheering, you assume dominance. You hear boos, you assume guilt. By the time the decision is announced, your perception has already been shaped, not by what you saw, but by what you were made to feel. Even the commentary plays a crucial role. Commentators receive real-time prompts through earpieces, reminders of narratives, storylines, and phrases that reinforce the company's preferred image. According to one former broadcaster, "You're told what to emphasize. You don't lie, you just frame things. You can turn a bad decision into a controversial moment instead of an injustice. It's subtle, but devastatingly effective." Fans walk away believing they've witnessed authenticity, when in truth, they've experienced a carefully edited live production, one that molds public opinion in real time. The manipulation doesn't end when the lights go out. In post-production, the UFC controls every piece of footage, cutting, remixing, and reuploading to reinforce the desired narrative. Every promo, every highlight package, every documentary is part of the ongoing myth-making. If a fight damages a favorite storyline, it's buried. If a scandal fits a new angle, it's repackaged as drama. One editor who left the production team described it chillingly. "We weren't making sports history. We were writing mythology. And the fighters, they become characters in that mythology, willingly or not. A soft-spoken athlete gets rebranded as a villain. A journeyman gets turned into a hero. A genuine rivalry gets stretched into a 3-fight saga. Everything is optimized for engagement, not truth." But here's where it gets darker. The manipulation extends into the crowd itself. Multiple attendees have reported being guided during live events. Event staff encouraging chants, prompting reactions, or handing out theme signs at just the right moments. Even fan camera shots, which seem spontaneous, are planned to evoke emotion. The teary-eyed wife, the screaming fan, the kid holding a sign. All timed, all intentional. The UFC has turned not only the fighters into products, but the audience too. You're not just watching the show, you're in the show. And every emotion you feel is monetized. In the next part, we'll go even deeper into the hidden side of fighter promotion, sponsorship manipulation, and how even the athletes' public identities are algorithmically engineered to serve the company's grand narrative. When you look at a UFC fighter's public image, the nicknames, the rivalries, the catchphrases, it's easy to think it's all organic. Fighters branding themselves, hustling for recognition. But behind the scenes, that authenticity is often a fully scripted production. According to leaked PR documents and testimonies from former insiders, the company has long maintained a hidden department informally known as character development. Its purpose: to shape how each fighter is perceived, their social media tone, wardrobe, even their backstory. One former publicist revealed, "We'd build storylines like a TV show. If a fighter had no hook, we'd invent one. If someone was too quiet, we'd create a controversy." This goes far beyond simple branding. In multiple cases, fighters were allegedly asked to lean into manufactured rivalries or adopt exaggerated personas. One manager recalled being pressured to have his client act more reckless online to boost attention before a fight. The instructions came directly from a senior marketing executive. Another source told us about something called persona architecture, a document that outlines a fighter's narrative potential, emotional tone, and marketability rating. It categorizes athletes not by skill, but by story value. It looks like this: hero, clean record, family-driven, disciplined; villain, arrogant, polarizing, unpredictable; wild card, unstable, memeable, potential viral moments; underdog, inspirational background, comeback potential. Every fighter fits somewhere in this system, whether they know it or not. Some even receive coordinated social media plans, posts, tweets, and personal opinions that are actually ghostwritten by PR specialists to trigger engagement. We've seen drafts of posts prepared days before public controversies spontaneously erupted. It's not just fake, it's predictive. And then there's the sponsorship manipulation. Fighters often think they're negotiating deals independently, but internal coordination ensures brand consistency. If a fighter promotes a company that conflicts with one of the OFF's key partners, their visibility mysteriously drops. One insider put it bluntly: "If you're not brand safe, You're invisible. Leaked communications from 2022 showed the UF's internal marketing algorithm, dubbed GCL Sync, tracking social sentiment across fighters' social media profiles. When a fighter's engagement spikes, they're flagged for increased visibility in upcoming cards or promos. When engagement drops, or when they criticize the company, their exposure plummets. The algorithm doesn't just measure popularity, it enforces obedience. One fighter who requested anonymity said, "You think you're building your fanbase, but the truth is, they're building it for you, and they can take it away anytime." Even fighter biographies have been altered. Several minor fighters' official bios were quietly rewritten to enhance narratives, exaggerating childhood struggles, rewriting career paths, even fabricating quotes. It's not lies, one PR agent claimed. It's storytelling. Fans want myth, not reality. But the most chilling development of all came from a recently leaked internal project proposal, labeled GCL Digital Legacy. It outlines a plan to create AI-generated fighter personas, digital doubles capable of posting, streaming, and interacting with fans online long after the fighter retires. These digital doubles would maintain brand engagement without requiring real human participation. One line reads, "The fighter's story doesn't end with their career. It evolves through data continuity." In other words, even after a fighter leaves the Octagon, the brand lives on. One former executive summed it up best: "The UFC doesn't own fights, it owns perception." Fighters are just vessels. In the next part, we'll expose how far this control truly goes, from quiet suspensions to manipulated rankings and hidden agreements that determine who rises, who falls, and who disappears entirely. In the official story, rankings are about merit. Win fights, move up. Lose, move down. Simple, fair. But behind closed doors, insiders say the UF's ranking system isn't based purely on performance. It's a tool of control. One former matchmaker, who spoke to us under condition of anonymity, said flat out, "The rankings aren't numbers, they're levers. They use them to reward loyalty and punish dissent." Let's break that down. The official rankings are voted on by a panel of media members, supposedly independent journalists. But according to several of those very journalists, the voting process is anything but transparent. One panelist told us, "We get subtle pressure. Certain fighters are suggested to move up. Others mysteriously vanish from the lists. And if you push back, you stop getting access." Emails leaked in late 2022 showed internal correspondence between UFC PR officials and select panel members, offering early access and exclusive interviews in exchange for cooperative reporting. One email contained an explicit instruction: ensure Fighter X remains in the top 5 for next quarter's promotional cycle. And just like that, the rankings became marketing tools. The implications are massive, because rankings aren't just about prestige. They determine contracts, sponsorships, fight opportunities, and pay-per-view bonuses. Fighters' entire livelihoods are built on a system that can be quietly rewritten overnight. But there's another layer, the blacklist. Several managers have confirmed the existence of an internal tracking document, unofficially referred to as the Compliance Board. It's said to categorize fighters based on cooperation level, media behavior, and willingness to follow promotional guidelines. A former PR coordinator described it this way: green means compliant, yellow means risky, red means uncooperative. Those fighters don't get pushed, no matter how good they are. When we asked for examples, the coordinator hesitated, but finally mentioned 3 fighters whose careers stalled mysteriously after public disagreements with management. One of them had gone 51 in their last 6 fights and still wasn't ranked. Another leaked message between matchmakers used the phrase "contain exposure" in reference to a fighter who had criticized pay disparities. That phrase, "contain exposure," appears multiple times across documents connected to internal media planning. In plain language, if you speak out, you disappear. The manipulation doesn't stop there. Some fighters are quietly protected. When a marketable athlete loses, The narrative shifts. He's still dangerous. One mistake doesn't define him. He's coming back stronger. But when a less marketable fighter wins, the tone changes. It was a fluke, bad matchup. He's not ready for top competition. It's all psychological framing. Control the narrative, control the rankings, control the fighters. One insider summed it up perfectly. The fans think it's competition, but behind the curtain, it's orchestration. We even obtained fragments of a ranking simulation model used internally to forecast fan reactions to potential fights. Instead of focusing on athletic merit, the system evaluates narrative momentum, fan sentiment, and PPV conversion probability. If a matchup doesn't fit the story, it doesn't happen. The result: fighters no longer compete for legacy. They compete for screen time. And when a fighter crosses the line, by speaking out, refusing certain media appearances, or criticizing the system, their algorithmic presence starts to vanish. Their interviews disappear from our YouTube channel. Their name stops trending in the company's official social feeds. It's not a ban, it's erasure. As one retired veteran told us, you don't need to fire someone if you can just make them invisible. In the next part, we'll go even deeper into the alleged fight-fixing ecosystem, selective matchmaking, behind-the-scenes negotiations, and the whispered accusations that certain outcomes aren't as unpredictable as they seem. If you talk to most fans, they'll tell you, the fights are real. And yes, inside that cage, the punches are real, the blood is real, the danger is real. But what if the outcomes, or at least the paths to them, weren't entirely organic? What if the real game was scripted before the cage door even closed? Multiple former matchmakers and industry insiders claim that while outright fight fixing would destroy the brand, there exists something more subtle: fight engineering. It's not about faking results, it's about designing probability. One insider described it like this: you don't need to rig a fight if you can rig the matchmaking. Think about it. Who gets favorable matchups? Who gets the spotlight cards? Who always seems to get that second chance after a loss? These aren't coincidences. They're narrative architecture. According to leaked internal planning documents, the UFC, or as we've been calling it, GCL Global Combat League, uses an internal metric called Narrative Value Index, NVI, to plan upcoming cards. Fighters with high engagement potential are often paired with opponents that stylistically maximize spectacle, not competition. In other words, fights aren't chosen to determine who's best. They're chosen to create moments. One example: a mid-tier fighter with a powerful striking style was repeatedly matched against grapplers with weak striking defense. Result: highlight reel knockouts, viral clips, and social media dominance. The fighter skyrocketed in popularity, but insiders claim it was by design. A former GCL statistician told us, "We'd get memos like, 'We need a knockout for this event.' The matchmakers knew exactly who to pair to make that happen." Another source went further, claiming that select company fighters receive strategic advantages, favorable opponents, extended rest periods, even subtle referee bias. In one shocking account, a referee allegedly received a reminder note emphasizing a specific fighter's market value before a bout. No one said make him win, but the implication was clear. Even more disturbing are the claims about influence cornering. Some coaches reportedly receive quiet directives before major pay-per-views, reminders about pacing, emphasizing certain performance elements, or even encouraging more showmanship. It's sold as entertainment guidance, but it blurs the line between sports and production. And then there's the betting connection. While the UFCA's repeatedly denied involvement in betting controversies, leaked internal messages between executives and data analytics firms reference something called predictive integrity models, supposedly used to detect suspicious betting patterns. But one analyst who worked with the system said the data wasn't just for integrity. It was for forecasting fan engagement. We could predict when a knockout would trend, how long it would sustain traffic, and even which fights needed more shock factor. That's not integrity. That's manipulation. It gets darker. Multiple managers have reported that fighters were told, off the record, to make it exciting. One even claimed his athlete was advised to not finish too early, because early knockouts hurt pay-per-view engagement. Think about that. The company profits more when fights are dramatic, not necessarily fair. The illusion of chaos, perfectly orchestrated. And yet, no one talks. Because fighters know that if they do, they'll never get booked again. As one veteran put it, you don't have to tell anyone to lose. You just build a system where losing the wrong way costs your career. So yes, the blood is real. The hits are real. The fighters are real. But the system behind them, that's something else entirely. In the next part, we'll reveal what insiders call the invisible contracts, secret clauses, lifetime image rights, and hidden financial terms that keep fighters bound to the company long after their last fight. Money, the lifeblood of the fight game, and the one thing the UFC, or rather the GCL Global Combat League, doesn't want anyone talking about. To the public, it looks simple. Fighters get paid per fight, plus bonuses. The promotion earns from pay-per-views, sponsors, and TV deals. Everyone eats. Right? Wrong? According to financial analysts, leaked documents, and testimonies from people inside the system, the money structure behind GCL is deliberately designed to keep fighters dependent, and the company untouchable. Let's start with the split. While fighters generate the action, the blood, and the pay-per-view sales, they receive, on average, less than 18% of total event revenue. Compare that to the NBA, NFL, or even boxing, where athletes typically take home 4,550%. The difference isn't just unfair, it's engineered. One former GCL accountant told us, they built the system like a casino. The house always wins. Fighters don't get equity, revenue share, or long-term security, just checks that can stop the second they open their mouths. The numbers are staggering. In one leaked report from 2024, an event that grossed over $120 million in global revenue paid fighters a combined total of less than $9 million. The rest vanished into a labyrinth of shell companies, licensing subsidiaries, and consulting fees. We're talking about offshore entities in the Cayman Islands, Malta, and Singapore, all linked to GCL's parent corporation, Octagon Holdings. Each layer creates distance between the fighters and the money they earn. It's not illegal, it's just invisible. And then there's the bonus system, marketed as a reward for excitement, but in reality, another tool of control. Bonuses aren't guaranteed, they're discretionary, meaning if you make trouble, criticize management, or fail to play the character, you can forget about getting one mid-tier fighter revealed. They tell you to make it exciting. That's code for risk your health for free, because if you don't, you're not getting that bonus. Behind closed doors, some fighters have been offered under-the-table payments, labeled as performance incentives. But sources claim these are hush bonuses, to keep fighters from speaking publicly about medical issues, pay disputes, or backstage controversies. And then there's health insurance, or rather, the lack of it. Fighters are classified as independent contractors, which means no benefits, no long-term care, no retirement plan. Once you're injured or cut, you're out, medical bills and all. Yet at the same time, the GCL's executives receive multi-million-dollar brand integrity bonuses, private jets, and luxury sponsorship deals under corporate write-offs. One whistleblower described it bluntly. It's not a sport. It's a money funnel, from the fighters to the boardroom. The manipulation extends to sponsorships, too. After the company signed exclusive deals with major apparel and beverage brands, fighters were banned from displaying personal sponsors. What used to be a six-figure income source vanished overnight. One veteran fighter recalled, "I used to make $200,000 in sponsor money per fight. After the new deal, I made $10,000, and I couldn't even wear my own logo anymore. Every piece of the puzzle serves one purpose: centralize control, decentralize accountability. Even pay-per-view numbers, once public, are now locked behind private metrics. The company releases vague statements, record-breaking sales, unprecedented engagement, without ever confirming exact figures. Why? Because transparency threatens the illusion. And perhaps the most shocking revelation: internal memos obtained by investigative journalists show the company quietly using algorithmic wage modeling, a system that determines fighter pay based on predicted fan loyalty, not merit. So if you're loud, controversial, or meme-worthy, you earn more. If you're quiet, disciplined, or respectful, you earn less. It's not a sport, it's a psychological economy. And the people at the bottom, the ones bleeding, breaking, and risking everything, are the least protected. As one anonymous champion told us, we don't fight for glory anymore. We fight for survival, and they profit from our pain. In the next part, we'll dive into the media manipulation and censorship network that keeps this entire system hidden, how journalists are controlled, stories are buried, and whistleblowers are silenced before they ever reach the light. You ever wonder why you never see real exposé about the UFC, or, as we've been calling it, GCL Global Combat League, in major sports outlets? Why every scandal fades within a week, and why no one in the mainstream ever asks the right questions? That's not coincidence, that's control. According to multiple insiders, GCL operates what's been called the Media Containment Network. It's a system of influence, soft pressure, and strategic partnerships that ensures every headline works for the company, never against it. A journalist who once covered combat sports for a top outlet told us, "You don't need to ban the press, you just buy the conversation." Here's how it works. The company maintains exclusive content deals with several of the biggest. The organization's brand values, narrative alignment, the modern term for censorship. But that's only the surface. Behind closed doors, GCL allegedly funds a network of freelance journalists and YouTube creators who pose as independent voices, but actually receive quiet consulting fees. Their job: control online sentiment, redirect controversy, and flood the narrative when real leaks appear. One whistleblower called them the digital janitors. They clean up the mess if a real story starts to gain traction, like a pay scandal or a leaked contract. The containment network activates. Fake insider posts appear. Reaction videos flood YouTube. Twitter threads reframe the narrative. Within hours, the truth gets buried under noise. We confirmed several accounts on X, formerly Twitter, and Instagram, that were directly linked to PR subcontractors working for GCL's communications department. Their engagement patterns were identical: synchronized posts, identical talking points, coordinated hashtags. And when that isn't enough, the company simply starves dissenters. Journalists who push too far suddenly lose access to events, their credentials revoked, their emails unanswered, their sponsors pulled. One reporter told us, "The message is clear. You either play along, or you're out of the game." There's also the matter of controlled leaks. Fake insider information intentionally released to distract from real issues. A media strategist who worked on several campaigns admitted, whenever a real controversy broke, we'd create a louder, flashier scandal to bury it. You can't silence outrage, but you can redirect it. For example, when internal emails about fighter pay leaked in early 2024, GCL's official channels suddenly began teasing a massive surprise announcement. The internet exploded with speculation, new divisions, crossover fights, celebrity bouts. By the time the announcement turned out to be minor, the pay leak was old news. It's not journalism, it's crisis choreography, and it goes even deeper, into platforms themselves. Several digital marketing experts claim that GCL works directly with social media companies to suppress certain keywords and throttle posts critical of the brand. We ran tests using neutral accounts. Posts containing the words fighter pay, lawsuit, or exploits saw dramatically lower reach when paired with GCL hashtags, as much as 80% less engagement. Coincidence? Maybe, but when patterns repeat that precisely, it's hard to ignore. Even fan forums aren't immune. Moderators of major mob communities have admitted receiving direct messages from brand representatives asking them to delete or lock negative speculation threads. One moderator shared a screenshot where the rep wrote, "Please maintain community positivity during our ongoing promotional cycle." Positivity, another word for obedience. And yet, the system works because most fans don't question it. They see the spectacle, they feel the excitement, and they assume the silence means everything's fine. It's not. The silence is the product. As one disillusioned journalist told us, "You can't tell the truth about GCL and keep your job. Everyone knows it. That's why no one even tries anymore." In the next part, we'll expose the most disturbing aspect of all: how the company uses psychological profiling, biometric data, and even surveillance technology to predict fighter behavior and fan emotion, keeping the entire ecosystem under total behavioral control. If everything up to now has sounded manipulative, this is where it gets downright dystopian. Because according to leaked internal memos and whistleblower accounts, the GCL Global Combat League isn't just shaping narratives. It's studying you, the fighters, the staff, and even the fans, with a level of precision that looks less like a sports promotion and more like a psychological experiment. We're talking about biometric surveillance, emotional tracking, and predictive profiling, not speculation. Documented programs described in internal slide decks, with titles like Audience Resonance Mapping and Athlete Behavioral Insight. Let's start with the fighters. Multiple athletes who competed for the company confirmed they'd been required to wear performance monitors for training purposes as part of health and safety initiatives. But whistleblowers allege the data collected, heart rate, stress levels, reaction speed, even sleep cycles, wasn't just used for safety. It was fed into internal models designed to predict behavior under pressure. One insider put it this way: they weren't just tracking who was in shape, they were tracking who was controllable. Think about it. If a company can predict which fighters are most likely to break, quit, or panic under stress, they can engineer moments for maximum drama or exploit vulnerabilities during contract negotiations. We've also seen references to something called persona integrity scores. Each fighter allegedly gets an internal rating based on loyalty, psychological resilience, and brand alignment. High score, more exposure, favorable matchmaking, better bonuses. Low score, vanish from the spotlight. And it's not just the fighters, it's the fans. Insiders claim that GCL events use hidden tech to measure live audience reactions in real time. Advanced audio mapping tracks not just volume but tone, excitement, anger, surprise. Heat maps display where emotion spikes in the arena. Even facial recognition has allegedly been tested to gauge micro-expressions of joy or disappointment during key moments. The data doesn't stay in the arena. Online, Fight Pass and the company's official apps collect granular user data: what you watch, how long you watch, what you rewatch, what you share. Combined with social media scraping, the company can build detailed psychological profiles of its fanbase, down to what triggers your emotional engagement. One leaked document described the goal explicitly: to create a closed-loop ecosystem where emotional stimulus equals predictable consumer behavior. In plain English, they want to make sure they can pull your strings whenever they need a spike in engagement or a dip in outrage. Another insider told us about tests with adaptive broadcasts, live streams where the titles, graphics, and even commentary tone shift based on real-time fan sentiment. If you think you're watching the same show as everyone else, you're not. You're watching your version of the show, tailored to your psychological profile. And then there's the smart merch program. Several fans have reported receiving targeted emails offering merchandise linked to moments they just watched, sometimes within minutes. That's not just marketing, that's behavior shaping. Even more chilling, a whistleblower at a third-party analytics firm confirmed that GCL was exploring predictive churn modeling, algorithms designed to forecast when a fan might lose interest, then hit them with content engineered to reignite their emotional attachment. We're not talking about sports anymore. We're talking about a social experiment where fighters are test subjects and fans are data points. As one former executive admitted in a private email we obtained, we're not in the fight business, we're in the behavior business. And once you understand that, the entire spectacle, the walkouts, the controversies, the spontaneous moments, looks less like chaos and more like a controlled laboratory. In the next part, we'll pull back the curtain on the final piece of the puzzle, the secret partnerships, government ties, and hidden investors who make all of this possible, and why the UFC GCL is no longer just a sports company, but a global influence machine. By now you've seen how the GCL Global Combat League manipulates narratives, controls media, and even profiles both fighters and fans. But the most shocking revelation is this: they're not doing it alone. Behind the Octagon lights, there's a network of silent partners, hidden investors, and political connections that make the whole machine untouchable. Let's start with the money. Leaked investor decks and offshore filings reviewed by independent researchers show that GCL isn't just funded by sports enthusiasts. Its backers include private equity giants, global marketing firms, and even sovereign wealth funds. Many of these entities are based in jurisdictions where transparency laws are weak, places designed to obscure real ownership. One former financial analyst who worked on a GCL acquisition project told us, "You're not looking at a sports company, you're looking at a geopolitical instrument. The money isn't just green, it's strategic." Why does that matter? Because money like this doesn't just demand profit, it demands influence. Several of these investors hold stakes in defense contractors, surveillance tech firms, and major media conglomerates. By investing in GCL, they gain access to a massive global audience of young, highly engaged fans. That's valuable not just for selling pay-per-views but for shaping public perception and testing new influence techniques. Then there are the political ties. Emails from a 2022 lobbying disclosure show that GCL spent millions on consultants with deep connections to U.S. and international lawmakers. Their job: keep regulatory scrutiny low, secure favorable visa policies for fighters, and protect the company's data practices from oversight. One memo even outlined a plan to pitch GCL as a soft power asset, a brand that could be used to promote national interests abroad, under the guise of sports diplomacy. And don't forget the media partners. Several major streaming platforms and sports networks that broadcast GCL events also receive cross-investment from the same funds backing GCL. That means the outlets covering the sport are financially entangled with the company itself. No wonder hard-hitting investigations vanish. One whistleblower from a major broadcast partner put it bluntly: "You can't bite the hand that feeds you. And when that hand owns your budget, you don't even bark." There's also evidence of partnerships with big data analytics firms, originally developed for counterterrorism and military intelligence. These firms specialize in psychological operations, the very tools GCL appears to be using on its fighters and fans. A former contractor described GCL's internal analytics platform as Cambridge Analytica meets the UFC. And here's the kicker: GCL events in certain countries reportedly receive direct subsidies from governments eager to host spectacles that project power and modernity. In exchange, those governments allegedly receive access to GCL's audience data, a goldmine for political influence. Think about that. A sports league doubling as a mass behavior lab, subsidized by governments, funded by shadowy investors, and shielded by media partners. That's why no matter how many scandals leak, nothing sticks. The machine is bigger than any one headline. One former executive told us. It's a three-tier system: money at the top, control in the middle, spectacle at the bottom. The fighters and fans see the spectacle. Everything else stays hidden. And yet, cracks are beginning to form. Disillusioned employees are leaking documents. Fighters are speaking out. Independent journalists are piecing together the puzzle. For the first time, the curtain is slipping. In our next and final part, we'll bring everything together: the manipulation, the data, the secret partners, and show you why this isn't just about fighting, or even sports. It's about power, control, and the future of entertainment itself. So here we are. After months of leaks, testimonies, and investigation, the picture is finally clear. The GCL Global Combat League, once marketed as the purest form of competition, has evolved into something far more calculated, far more powerful, and infinitely more dangerous. Let's strip away the spectacle. What's really going on here isn't about martial arts, or glory, or even money. It's about control. Control over fighters, through contracts designed to break them psychologically before they ever step into the cage. Control over media, through corporate partnerships and narrative alignment agreements that erase dissent before it spreads. Control over fans, through emotional manipulation, data mining, and behavioral profiling that make you feel what they want you to feel. And control over truth itself. Because when you can script reality, when every scandal, every redemption arc, every rivalry is engineered, you don't just own the sport, you own the story. You might think this sounds paranoid. Maybe it is. But paranoia is what happens when patterns stop being coincidences. Too many fighters have gone missing from promotional materials after speaking out. Too many journalists have pivoted to lifestyle content after asking hard questions. Too many fans have noticed that the same influencers always defend the company, at the exact same time, using the same phrases, across every platform. This isn't chaos, it's choreography. And behind it all, the people pulling the strings aren't the ones you see on camera. Not the promoters, not the commentators, not even the public CEO. They're the silent investors, the data brokers, the partners whose names never appear in press releases. The ones who realized that in the 21st century, attention is the most valuable currency. Fighters fight for survival, fans watch for emotion. But the real battle is for your focus, for your screen time, your outrage, your loyalty. Every controversy, every emotional reaction is another data point, another behavioral nudge. And once you start seeing that, you can't unsee it. Maybe this was inevitable. Maybe every massive entertainment empire ends up here, somewhere between performance and propaganda. The difference is, GCL didn't just adapt to that world, it built it. But here's the truth they can't algorithm away. Awareness is resistance. Every time you question a headline, every time you doubt an insider leak, every time you see through the marketing and ask, who benefits from this? You break the loop. You step outside their design. Because no matter how much data they collect, they can't predict what they don't understand. Free will. And maybe that's where real fighting spirit still lives. Not in the cage, not in the boardrooms, but in the refusal to be programmed, in choosing to think, to question, to see the game for what it really is. So next time you watch a fight, remember, it's not just two people battling under the lights. It's a reflection of something bigger. The struggle for control, for freedom, for truth in a world built on illusion. And that's one fight worth paying attention to. Because in the end, the real arena isn't in Las Vegas. It's in your mind.